Blueprint presents. 5 NFL franchises decided to turn their teams over to rookie quarterbacks in 2012, an unprecedented number thus far. So as they embark on their rookie campaigns, we will follow. So, now let's meet the NFL's starting 5. At number 5, a 5'11" rookie out of Wisconsin and the starter of the Seattle Seahawks, introducing number 3, Russell Number 4, a 6'3" rookie from Oklahoma State and the starter of the Cleveland Browns. Give it up for number 3, Brandon Weeden. At number 3, a 6'4" rookie via Texas A&M and starter for the Miami Dolphins, number 17, Tannehill. At number 2, a 6'2" rookie and second overall draft pick in the 2012 NFL Draft by way of Baylor and the starter of the Washington Redskins, welcome, number 10, Robert Griffin III. And at number 1, a 6'4" rookie and first overall selection in the 2012 NFL Draft by way of Stanford and the starter of the Indianapolis Colts, number 12, Andrew. This is your starting 5.
Welcome. This is the NFL's starting 5. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. And we finally completed the 2012-2013 season. What a remarkable season it was for the NFL starting 5. I can't begin to explain the magnitude and the impact that these 5 rookies, and really 3 of them in particular, Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III, and Russell Wilson, have had on this league. A profound impact. But this starting 5 unit, they all came into the league and contributed something in a unique way. And it wasn't always the prettiest. It wasn't always the most dynamic. But these 5 individuals, these 5 rookies came in and they did a wonderful job. But only 3 of them have stood out and separated themselves from rookies, running back, quarterbacks, defensive ends, cornerbacks. They've separated themselves from the pack for the most part. There are a few other rookies at different positions that really made a name for themselves as well. But for the NFL starting 5, I can honestly say that this group has the potential to be the greatest draft class ever of quarterbacks. That's a huge statement. We always see that 83 class of Kelly, Marino, and Elway dangled out there. But these 5 individuals, and 3 of them are shining right now. But when it's all said and done, all 5 of these members of the NFL starting 5 can really put their names in the record books at some point for something, because they are that talented. Each of them have taken steps, some baby steps, others huge leaps, toward being good, solid, great even NFL quarterbacks. But this NFL starting 5 class is unlike no other. And it's been a joy to follow their every move, to chronicle them as they continue to embark on greatness. And they're not finished. 3 of these members of the NFL starting 5 made it to the postseason. So there's a lot to talk about. We're not going to do weekly ranks or anything like that. We're just going to give you a season review, a recap, rank these quarterbacks 1 to 5 as we wrap up this season, put a bow on it, and then we'll start talking about the postseason for the members of the starting 5 that made it. So let's talk about the season in review for these quarterbacks. We'll talk about the quarterbacks in their order, and then we'll rank them quickly in terms of their season overall rank, and then we'll get into the quarterbacks that made it to the postseason. So let's talk about these quarterbacks briefly and talk about what their seasons entailed and what their teams were able to accomplish and what these quarterbacks will need to do moving forward to become better and help their teams get over the hump if they weren't able to, or win now, as 3 of these quarterbacks are still playing and still have aspirations of hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. Normally we start at the back and work our way up when talking about these quarterbacks in any capacity, but this time we're just going to start at the top and work our way down. Why not? It's the end. Why not switch it up? Do something different. So this time we'll start with Andrew Luck, the first overall pick in the 2012 draft. And let's talk about his season. Right now, Andrew Luck has his Indianapolis Colts football team in the postseason. One of the 3 members of the starting 5 to have his team in the postseason. He's had a remarkable season. You look at his stats, and sometimes they can be misleading. This team asked a lot of Andrew Luck, more so than any of these other members of the NFL starting 5. The Colts put a lot on Andrew Luck's shoulders, and his shoulders were very broad because they were able to carry this team into the postseason with a mark of 11-5 on the season. That was good enough for second place in the AFC South behind the Houston Texans. So they didn't win the division, but they had an exceptional year, did the Indianapolis Colts. And the key reason why, the chief reason why, was Andrew Luck. The emergence of him as their savior turned out to be the right pick, the right move. They cut ties with Peyton Manning. A lot of people didn't agree with that move. When you have a can't-miss prospect, as he was given that moniker coming out of college, these are the results you get. And I thought that he was so highly touted coming out of Stanford that there was no way he could live up to the expectations. I was wrong. He has lived up to them, and for me, for my money, he's exceeded those expectations. Who saw the Colts winning 11 games this season? They had a soft schedule. Who cares? Who saw the Colts winning 11 games? Raise your hand. Anybody? I don't think there's many people out there with their hands raised right now that saw the Colts going 11-5, clinching a playoff berth and really coming into the postseason as a team that could make some noise in the AFC. So let's look at Andrew Luck as he progressed through the season and see what his numbers ended up looking like to finish out the regular season. Andrew Luck played in 16 games, all 16 games, started every single game for the Indianapolis Colts. He was 339 of 627 passing, which equals out to a 54.1% completion percentage. That's the lowest of any member of the NFL starting 5. So that gives you an indication as to how many times. Do you hear that huge number? No, not the completions, the attempts. 627. Matthew Stafford set the record this year with over 700 passing attempts in a season. Andrew Luck wasn't that far behind. 627. That's a lot of pass attempts for anyone, let alone a rookie. But that's what the Colts asked of him. And of course, no one else in the starting 5 is even close in terms of passing attempts. His number of completions, some of the members of the starting 5 don't even have that many attempts. He has that many completions. So the Colts put a lot on his shoulders, and he responded by winning 11 games for the Indianapolis Colts. You look at the passing yards, 4,324. That is also the most and leads the members of the NFL starting 5. So he was busy. You don't throw it 627 times and don't yield 4,000 yards. Those are a lot of passing attempts. You knew he was going to have over 4,000 yards passing. What a phenomenal year Andrew Luck has had. And it's not over yet, as he is in the playoffs looking to continue on his season for the Indianapolis Colts. 23 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. That's a good number for him, especially when Looking at it in the context of where this number was just a month ago, 5 weeks ago. Those interceptions and touchdowns were neck and neck. He finally got that number over 1-to-1. And so I have no complaints about that. For the amount of times the coach asks him to chuck it, you're going to have mistakes. You're going to turn it over. But for him to finally eclipse the amount of interceptions with the amount of touchdowns speaks volumes to his maturation as the season progressed and how he started to take better care of the football. 4 weeks ago, Andrew Luck probably already had 14, 15 interceptions. That INT number really tailed off toward the end of the season, so good for Andrew Luck. Way to take care of the football. 255 rush yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, a 76.5 passer rating is what all that amounts to. That's not a great number for a passer rating. It's not a great number. But the only number that anyone cares about is that left-hand column number in the win-loss region. And that left-hand column says 11, which is good enough to get you in the postseason as a number 5 seed in the AFC. And Andrew Luck has taken this franchise to new heights. Look, Peyton Manning took this franchise to places it's never been before. Peyton Manning took this franchise to places it hadn't been in a long time. Andrew Luck has done something no one else has done in this franchise before. And that's taken this team to the playoffs in their rookie season. And so, kudos to Andrew Luck. What a huge season he has had. And this is why I think that this NFL starting 5 group has the potential to be one of the best ever. One of the best draft classes ever because of guys like Andrew Luck. Next up was the second pick in the draft, the second overall pick in the 2012 draft, Robert Griffin III. And his season goes beyond words. To really describe what he's done for a franchise wouldn't be doing him justice. He's turned the Washington Redskins franchise from the laughingstock of the NFC East and one of the laughingstocks of the league into a very formidable and potentially dangerous team in the National Football League. In one season, the Redskins have gone from chopped liver to prime steak. And it's because of one man. It's because of Robert Griffin III. Now, he's had help. He's had help. He didn't do this all by himself. But in the NFL, in the National Football League, it all starts with your quarterback. You don't have one of those, you don't have a chance. And Robert Griffin III came into Washington, put his thumbprint on this team, on this franchise, on this city. And he gave them something that they've been missing for a long time, quite a long time. And that was hope. Hope. Hope that they can win. Hope that they have a chance. Hope that they can win. Hope that they can go to the postseason. Hope that they can win a Super Bowl. Hope that the future is bright. And that's what Robert Griffin III has given them. And here are his numbers to back that claim up. Robert Griffin III started and played in 15 games this season. Missed 1 game due to injury. Remember, you could honestly say that he played 14 games and a half. He missed a half of football basically against the Atlanta Falcons. Or maybe just a quarter, a shade over a quarter and a half. But nonetheless, he missed but a half of that game. He missed just about a half of that game. And he missed the Cleveland Browns game after suffering what looked like an ugly injury to his knee, which turned out to be a sprained LCL. So he dodged a few bullets this season. But he played in 15 games, started 15 games with the Washington Redskins. 258 completions over 393 passing attempts, which equals out to a 65.6% completion percentage. That's tops in the NFL starting 5. That's not just a good number for a rookie. That's a great number for any member in the National Football League. Rookie, veteran, all of them alike. That's a great number to have. 3,200 yards passing. Very symmetrical numbers for Robert Griffin III. He has 3,200 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions on the season. So very symmetrical numbers for Robert Griffin III. And that touchdown to interception ratio is 4-1. You can't beat that. Many quarterbacks have done much better, but those have all been veteran quarterbacks. Your Aaron Rodgers, your Drew Breeses, your Tom Brady's. Those have been those type of quarterbacks, those caliber quarterbacks, guys that have been in the league 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Those type of numbers generally don't come from a rookie. And so 20 touchdowns versus 5 interceptions means you know something, you're taking care of the football, and you get it as a quarterback. And Robert Griffin III definitely gets it as an NFL quarterback. You look at his 815 rush yards, that's tops in this group. That's tops for any quarterback. And really, that's outshining some running backs in the National Football League. Some starting running backs in the National Football League. I mean, those are gaudy numbers from a QB. And then you look at that, he tops that off with another 7 rush touchdowns. So he accounts for 27 touchdowns for the Washington Redskins this year. That's a huge number for a rookie. That all amounts to a 102.4 passer rating, the highest ever for a rookie quarterback. Not the highest in the NFL starting 5, not the highest of this draft class or any draft class of the last 10 years or decade. This is the highest of any rookie quarterback ever since this stat has been taken. That says a lot. And he's been a lot for the Washington Redskins, more than you can ever imagine. And so he has his team right now in the postseason after finishing at 10-6. This team was left for dead at the bye week when they were 3-6. But Robert Griffin III refused to quit. He came out in the media and said, we're not quitting. We're going to make a go of this thing. We're going to give it a run. And we're going to take it one game at a time. And that's exactly what the Redskins have done, embarking on a 7-game winning streak, which landed them in the postseason and landed them as the NFC East champions. They will be hosting a playoff game as the number 4 seed in the NFC playoffs. Robert Griffin III has really turned this Washington Redskins franchise around. Next up, drafted 7th overall, is Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. And he's had a solid campaign in 2012. He really held up his end of the bargain in the NFL starting 5. Not a lot of gripes here. He could have been better. He could have done more for his team. But with the lack of talent that's on that roster, I'd have to say that he did one heck of a job. Bang up job by Ryan Tannehill this season. You look at his numbers, his team finished the season 7-9. And to me, they overachieved. And a big part of why they were able to do so, Ryan Tannehill. Without Ryan Tannehill, this is probably a 5, maybe a 6, possibly and probably more likely a 4-win team though. Without Ryan Tannehill's services. I mean, he really came in and put a stamp on this franchise, one that has been looking for a quarterback, a franchise quarterback, since the retirement of Dan Marino. And I think that their search might be over. Ryan Tannehill really played well this season, and in stretches, played good enough for this team to make it to the postseason. So let's take a look at his numbers. Ryan Tannehill played in 16 games. Technically, he started 16 games, but really he only played in 15. If you can remember that Jets game, he went out of the game on the second possession of the game and didn't return with a knee injury. They thought that might be serious. Turned out to be just a sprain. He was back the next week, but he basically didn't play in that game. So technically he started 16 games, but he really only played in 15. You look at his numbers. 282 of 484, which equals out to a 58.3 completion percentage. Not bad. That's right around where a rookie is normally found. And so that's not a bad number at all for Ryan Tannehill. You look at his 3,294 passing yards. That's 3rd on this list among the members of the starting 5. So he held his own in the pass game for the Miami Dolphins. And again, he didn't have a lot of talent out wide. There was Brian Hartline on one side, Devon Best in the slot, and not much more to speak of for Ryan Tannehill. So he did a lot with a little. So again, you have to take into consideration what he had around him. There was not a lot of pieces, not a lot of talent, and he went out and got it done. 12 touchdowns over 13 interceptions. wasn't able to quite get over that hump of that one-to-one that you're looking for. He was under that one-to-one ratio that you look for in a quarterback in terms of touchdowns to interceptions. He struggled with that all season long. He started out really slow. The interceptions kind of piled up early on, and so he had to play catch-up. He was able to do so, but then after having a stretch of maybe 3-4 games where he didn't turn it over at all, he went back and fell into his old ways, had a relapse, turned it over in succession in about 3 straight games. And then he went back to not turning it over to finish out the season, but he could never quite get over that hump. But once again, a rookie is going to make mistakes, especially one that doesn't have a lot of talent around him. He's going to feel the need to press, try to make some throws, and guys won't win one-on-one matchups sometimes, and you'll turn it over because of it. He also had a problem and an issue with balls being tipped in the air and picked off. That's something that he needs to address in the offseason, something that he got better as time progressed over the season, but he has to be better. He's a big, tall, strong kid. No need for him to be having passes deflected at the line of scrimmage. Not like he's 6 foot, 6'1", or 6'2". This is a 6'4" quarterback that stands tall in the pocket with presence. He shouldn't have passes tipped as often as he did in the pocket. So that's something that he'll need to work on. Taking his eyes off of receivers and not telegraphing where and when he's going to throw the football so that defenders can get their hands up and knock the football down. He added 211 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns came attached with that. So not bad for Ryan Tannehill, who was an ex-receiver in college. He can run, he can move, and he showed his athleticism at times in this season. And so I think he needs to use that some more. Have the threat of you tucking the ball in the pocket and running if nothing's there, and making teams be honest when they're playing against you. That's something that he also needs to add to his game as he moves forward. And so all of those numbers compiled leads to a 76.1 passer rate. Not the worst, as he didn't finish worst in the NFL starting 5 in terms of passer rating, but he could have been so much better. If he eliminated some of those mistakes, and again, early on he made a lot of mistakes. At the end of the season, he kind of stopped making those mistakes, but he had his moments where he turned the football over. If he could eliminate those mistakes, that passer rating will climb. He had solid performances in this season. He beat some good teams this year. So Ryan Tannehill got the Dolphins to a 7-9 record, which was good for second in the AFC East. Not good enough to make the postseason, but that was a very impressive rookie campaign for Ryan Tannehill, if I may say so myself, landing him second in the AFC East and really giving them something to build towards in the near future. So next up on the list is Brandon Weeden, and he's the last of the NFL starting 5 to be drafted in the first round. The Browns came back into the first round to select Brandon Weeden, and he was solid. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't tremendous either. Of all the members of the starting 5, I felt like there was a lot of growth for him. Not the most in the NFL starting 5, but I felt like he had some of the most meaningful growth. And I'll explain what that means here in a second. But let's look at how Brandon Weeden was able to lead the Browns to a 5-11 record. And I think that 5-11 for this team was an overachievement. You look at 5 wins and you say, that's not a lot of wins. You didn't expect the Browns to win that many games this season. I didn't expect the Browns to win but 3 games. So to come out with 5 and have one of those wins be against the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're doing something. You're going in the right direction. So let's talk about Brandon Weeden, how he's able to help this Cleveland Browns team get 5 wins on the season, and what he needs to do moving forward to become a better quarterback and to do his part to be one of the best members of the NFL's starting 5. 15 games for Brandon Weeden. He missed the season finale as he got injured against the Broncos in Week 16, wasn't able to participate in the Browns season finale in Week 17 against the Steelers. So he only played in 15 games this season. 297 of 517 for Weeden. As you see, the Browns threw the ball quite a bit. They asked a lot of Brandon Weeden. And they were behind a lot, were the Browns. And when you're behind a lot, you're going to throw the football to try to come back. And so that's why he has so many passing attempts. He could have had more completions, though. He left a lot of yards, a lot of big plays out on the field just by not making decisive decisions. And that's something he'll work on, he'll get better at as an NFL quarterback. Those numbers bear out 57.4% completion percentage. Again, right around where you'll find a rookie most times. There's nothing to really gripe about there. That's a solid number for a rookie in the National Football League. So don't have a complaint really there for Brandon Weeden, other than that number could have been a lot higher had he been more decisive in some of his decision making in the season. But those numbers equal out to 3,385 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. And just like Ryan Tannehill, he was never able to quite catch that interception total. He started off bad. I mean, his first game of the season was a 4-interception performance against the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, that set the table for his struggles early on in the season. And so when you start out in your first game with 4 interceptions, you've got a lot of work to do just to catch up and break even. And he was never able to catch up to those interception numbers. And they really remained steady all year long. He never really just shut off the turnover faucet. He had a span of maybe 2 weeks or so where he didn't turn it over, but there was never a elongated period of time in this season where he just didn't turn it over. There was never a 4-week, 5-week period where he just didn't turn it over and was throwing a touchdown pass here and there and really helping the Browns win. They had a 3-game winning streak, did the Cleveland Browns, and he played his best football of the season. It wasn't a coincidence. He plays his best football, the Browns going a 3-game winning streak. But there were games that the Browns could have, should have won, but they didn't get it done. And some of that can be attributed to Brandon Weeden just not making enough plays. But look, I won't hold that against him. Brandon Weeden is a quarterback that just lagged behind slightly the rest of the NFL starting 5. And again, I say this all the time. Maturation for everyone is different. Each quarterback is a separate entity. Guys mature at a different rate. And so it's just like life. Everyone matures at a different pace. You might meet a 16-year-old that's mature way beyond his years. He acts like he's 30 years old, like he's already been here before. And then you'll meet a 30-year-old that still thinks he's 19. And so everyone matures at a different rate. Same with quarterbacks. It's no different. And there's no equation that tells you how fast a guy is going to mature. There's no X plus QB plus amount of playing times age equals maturation. There's no such thing in the NFL. So guys are going to mature at their own rate. And Brandon Weeden is just slightly behind everyone else. That's no knock on him. He's a rookie. Defensive coordinators in the National Football League, this is what they do. They live to confuse rookie quarterbacks. It's easy to pick apart a college defense. You get in the NFL, and defensive coordinators are licking their chops. They're salivating when they see a rookie quarterback. And so you're going to have growing pains, and Brandon Weeden had his fair share. But he was solid for the Browns this season. Make no mistake about it. You look at his rush yards, 111, no rushing touchdowns. He doesn't need to run. That's not going to be his strong suit. He'll never confuse himself for Jay Cutler or Jake Locker or any one of these athletic quarterbacks that can run. He's not going to be that guy. He doesn't need to be, though. This Browns offensive line is the best of any of these members of the NFL starting 5. The Browns offensive line, if they can keep it intact, will keep Brandon Weeden upright for years to come. They're the best offensive line, one of the best in the league. Not just on this list, they're one of the best in the league. And so Brandon Weeden will have time to throw, and that's part of the reason why I felt like his completion percentage, that's part of the reason why I thought his completion percentage should have been higher, and he should have made a little bit more plays and maybe helped this team win a couple more games. But look, again, that's part of the process. All of those numbers bear out to a 72.6 passer rating, which is fine. That's where you're going to find a rookie most times. That's the worst in the NFL starting 5, but Ryan Tannehill and Andrew Luck aren't that far off. They're not that far away from him in terms of passer rating. So you're going to find rookies making mistakes and find them right around that 75 passer rating mark. That's just where you're going to find a rookie most times than not. And so Brandon Weeden helped this team along this season, win 5 games, go 5-11. They finished last in the AFC North. Again, no reason to hang your head. One of those wins was against the Steelers. That's a step in the right direction. If Colt McCoy, and this is all you need to know, if Colt McCoy was the quarterback of the Browns this season, they would have won 3 games like they did last season, and they would have been one of the worst teams in the league again. Instead, they won 5 games, and they were a formidable opponent for most teams on each week that they played in the National Football League. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Brandon Weeden was able to help this team along. There's a new GM. There's going to be a new coach. So hopefully the new staff can come in and help Brandon Weeden along, help him become a better member of the NFL's starting 5. Last but not least, and I feel like we do this to him all the time, and that's why he's getting so much pub right now, so much press, and it's well-deserved. Because last but not least in the NFL starting 5 is Russell Wilson. He was drafted in the 3rd round, the only member of the NFL starting 5 to not be drafted in the 1st round. And I think he's playing with that chip on his shoulder each and every single week. I'm pretty sure there's been plenty of times when there's been coaches and scouts who have told him, hey, I don't know if you're going to make it. I don't know if you're cut out for this. And he's using that to fuel his fire each and every day he steps on the field. And we're talking about Russell Wilson here, the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. This guy's been phenomenal all season long. And I've told you, to me, he's been one of the most steady quarterbacks, not just in this group, but in the league. He hasn't had that many up and down games. He hasn't had that many up and down stretches in this season. He's really had one stinker this year. And if you wanted to, you could throw the 49ers game in there as well. But the only real game that he struggled in was against the Rams in St. Louis early on in the season, when he threw about 3 or 4 interceptions in that game. That was it. He struggled against the 49ers, but that was on the road. That was a tough defense. And I thought that he played solid in that game. His receivers didn't help him out. They dropped passes in that game. If they catch the football, maybe the Seattle Seahawks win that football game. Who knows? So I only count one game that he struggled in, and that was the Rams. And so let's talk about his numbers, what he did in this season, and why he's one of the best members of the NFL starting 5, and why he's one of the best quarterbacks, not just in this group, but in the league. Russell Wilson played in all 16 games, started all 16 games for the Seattle Seahawks. 252 of 393, so he's got the same amount of passing attempts as Robert Griffin III. And you look at their numbers, they're not that far off. They're not that far off in terms of proximity to each other. You can see why these quarterbacks kind of mirror each other, and it's funny that they'll be facing off against one another in the postseason. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but 252 of 393 equals out to a 64.1% completion percentage, second best in the NFL starting 5, and again, right behind Robert Griffin III and his 65.6. Again, not that far off. These guys are neck and neck in a lot of statistical categories, and they play similar to each other. They both are mobile quarterbacks that can beat you with their legs as well as their arm, and they're not afraid to run, but their best attribute is throwing the football. Make no mistake about it. And so they're very similar in a lot of ways. 3,118 yards passing for Russell Wilson on the season. And again, Robert Griffin III, 3,200. Not that far off. We're talking 82 yards apart are these two quarterbacks on the season. So again, these guys are very similar in their stats this season. 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions only. That's a beautiful touchdown to interception ratio. We're at 2-1. We're nearing 3-1. And that's a very good total. He almost set the record for most touchdown passes by a rookie. He had 26. One more touchdown would have given him the record. He's tied for the most with Peyton Manning. And he could have broke that record. He chose not to. He had a chance at the end of the season, last game, to throw a pass for a touchdown. Instead, he tucked it and ran and got a touchdown. So he could have broken that record, but doesn't matter. What matters is those interception numbers after about week 7, week 8, were right around 7 or 8. And they tailed off. They almost were non-existent at the end of the season. We're talking with 8 games to go, he probably had about 8 interceptions. And in his final 8 games, he probably only threw 2 or 3 interceptions. 3 max. I mean, the guy turned that faucet completely off. Slowed it to a drip. All the while still delivering touchdown passes. He was phenomenal down the stretch for the Seattle Seahawks. He added 489 rush yards for 4 touchdowns. And that's a threat that I thought he didn't utilize enough. Toward the end of the season, he started to run more. Really, a lot of those numbers came against the Buffalo Bills. He scored 3 rushing touchdowns against them. And his last touchdown came against the Rams in the last week of the season. So all 4 of his touchdowns rushing on the season came in the last 3 weeks of the season. So Russell Wilson really wasn't utilizing his legs to run and score touchdowns. He was utilizing them more in a Fran Tarkenton type of sense where he was running around to make plays in the passing game. Russell Wilson is the type of quarterback that will scramble around 12 yards behind the line of scrimmage just so he can throw a 15-yard pass down the field. Or so he can run for 5 yards on the play. He'll run a total of 40 yards to gain 3 yards. That's the type of quarterback that Russell Wilson is, and that's the type of threat that he poses to defenses all across the National Football League. His numbers equal to 100, on the dot, 100 passer rating, which is the second highest passer rating behind, yes, you guessed it, Robert Griffin III. That's the second highest rookie passer rating of all time. And I can't begin to describe how impressed I've been with Russell Wilson all season long. And look, from start to finish, he's had the most growth of any quarterback in this group. It's not close. He started out the season kind of skittish. The Seahawks didn't really entrust him with the whole entire offense. By the time the season was finished, the Seahawks were relying on him to get it done and run that offense. And so he's taken the biggest step of any quarterback in the starting 5. And so all of that work for Russell Wilson amounts to an 11-5 record on the season, which was good enough for second in the NFC West, only behind the San Francisco 49ers. And so that was good enough for the 5th seed in the NFC playoffs. And so they'll be playing in the playoffs, and he'll be the 3rd quarterback in this group to make it to the postseason, as Robert Griffin III and Andrew Luck both also going to the postseason. And so what a remarkable season for Russell Wilson and for all of the members of the NFL starting 5. So quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the rankings for the season. I'm just going to comb over them quickly. There won't be a lot of dramatics here. There won't be all the finger waving. I'm just going to give you the numbers quickly. Maybe I'll do the finger waving. I kind of like doing that. So I'm just going to give you the rankings and tell you a little bit behind them and just move on. I'm not going to be long-winded with this. I'm just going to gloss over it so we can get to the quarterbacks that have made it to the playoffs, talk about that briefly, and then wrap this thing on up. So without any further ado, let's get into the season rankings for the NFL starting 5. And really, I'm putting everyone back into their proper place. Everyone is back into their right slots. And I'm looking at this from the season as a whole. And at number 5 is Brandon Weeden. And I had to put him back at 5. And he spent some time in the season at 4. About 4, maybe 5 week stretch at the number 4 spot. But to me, his record and what it could have been, what it maybe should have been, and with the offensive line and the weapons around him, he has a lot of talented guys around him. I can't put him anywhere higher than 5th. I can't put him above anyone on this list because I thought that he could have done more with the talent that he has around him, the offensive line that's protecting him. And yeah, they're the Browns. There's a mental, psychological hurdle that you have to cross when you're a Cleveland Brown. You have to learn how to win. Everyone in that locker room needs to learn how to win football games. There's a losing culture that you have to shake when you're a Cleveland Brown. I get that. But Brandon Weeden had the ability to help them shake that a lot faster, and I didn't think he did enough in certain instances to help them shake that, and so he comes in at number 5. The number 4 quarterback in the NFL's starting 5 is Ryan Tannehill. And his 7-9 mark, which is the 4th best on this list, tells you exactly why he is where he is. And look, I felt like he did the most on this list of any quarterback with the talent that he had. I didn't think there was a lot of talent out there in Miami. I don't feel like there's a lot of talent in Indianapolis either. I think there could be more talent. That's debatable, though. Some of those guys have really opened my eyes in Indianapolis. Not so much in Miami. I just feel like there's not a lot of talent out there for Ryan Tannehill. And so for him to finish 9-7, for the Dolphins to finish 9-7, I think that's a true testament to how good he was for the Dolphins this year and how good he can be moving forward if he cuts out some of the mistakes and makes a little bit more plays and has more playmakers around him. So Tannehill comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3 in the NFL starting 5 is Andrew Luck. And really, Andrew Luck could be higher on this list, but the turnovers, and the Colts asked a lot of Andrew Luck. They asked a lot of him. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, the turnovers. But the completion percentage, no excuse for that. No excuse to have such low completion percentage numbers, to have as many games as he did with less than 50% completion percentage. I can't stand for it. The ball hit the ground for me too many times for Andrew Luck. And so he did a Houdini act with the talent, I think, because there's some guys around him that really stepped up, and I feel like he elevated their game. They didn't step up because they're just good players. They stepped up because Andrew Luck demanded it of them and helped elevate their games. We've seen Donnie Avery. He's been in the league. He played for the Rams. He played for the Titans. He was never this good. Andrew Luck steps in, he looks like a different man. And that's what I'm talking about. Case in point. And so Andrew Luck comes in at number 3 because he's done a lot with a little, and he's got this team in the postseason. And I think that is really the mark of a good quarterback, making others around you better. And Andrew Luck did that in his rookie campaign. Coming in at number 2 on the NFL's starting 5 is Russell Wilson. You could argue that he's number 1, but for my money, he's number 2. He's been number 2 all season long, and he's been as steady as they come. I mean, he's been the definition of steady at the quarterback position. And really, he started to elevate his game at the final stretch of this season. When the Seahawks needed him to play his best football, that's exactly what he did. He helped elevate the play of the players around him. And at the beginning of the season, it was Marshawn Lynch in the run game carrying this offense. And he was just supplementing the offense. He was just helping add to whatever Marshawn Lynch in the running game was doing. At the end of the season, it was the other way around. Russell Wilson was carrying this offense, and whatever Marshawn Lynch could give them in the run game was helping supplement and help to add to whatever the Seahawks was doing offensively. And so Russell Wilson has grown the most of any member in the NFL starting 5. He deserves to be number 2 on this list, and he has been better than advertised, and he deserves to be number 2. And he's been a forgotten man sometimes, and he deserves all the recognition and admiration that he's receiving right now as the playoffs draw near, because he's been playing that good all season long. Easy to get lost in the Pacific Northwest, but he's played good football all season long for the Seattle Seahawks. He's number 2 on this list. Coming in at number 1, numero uno, Robert Griffin III. Now, you can call me biased if you like, but I'm being objective here. He's number 1 for a reason. Only 5 interceptions on the season. That's hard to do for a veteran quarterback, nonetheless for a rookie. Okay? That's hard to do in the National Football League. Only 5 versus 20 touchdown passes. That in itself was good enough for me. But just in case if you need more reasons why he's number 1 on this list, he's the only rookie on this list to make it to the Pro Bowl, and rightfully so. He was one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFC all season long. He has the best passer rating of any of the members of the starting 5. He has the best passer rating ever for any rookie quarterback in National Football League history. Need I say more? He has the best completion percentage of anyone on this list. Robert Griffin III added over 800 yards rushing, not to mention 7 more touchdowns on the ground. He did it all for the Washington Redskins, helped propel them to a 7-game winning streak to end the season, and got this team into the playoffs as a division winner at 10-6. He's your best quarterback in the NFL starting 5, and he is the number 1 quarterback in the NFL's starting 5. So that's going to wrap up that portion of the show. Now, what I want to get to quickly, and then we're going to get out of here, is the Three members of the NFL starting five that made it to the postseason. First time in NFL history that three rookie quarterbacks have made it to the postseason in their first season. That's why they're rookie quarterbacks. So, that gives you an indication of just how strong the NFL starting five really is. And these three members really had that class. And Andrew Luck was the first to really appear like he was going to clinch a playoff berth. He had his team playing good football, and at one point they were 9-4 on the season. You knew they were going to make it. And in the AFC, where the bottom half of that conference was really weak, they had it sewn up. So you knew Andrew Luck was going to take his team to the postseason. All they had to do was win one more game, and they did so. He ended up winning 2 more games, and so he takes his team into Baltimore as they travel to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. They're the 5 seed. The Ravens are the 4 seed. They have a shot in that game. We're going to watch from afar as Andrew Luck takes that Colt team into M&T Bank Stadium and try to get a win. They have their coach back on the sideline, Chuck Pagano, who was battling leukemia. He's better now. It's in remission. They have a little something extra to play for. They're not just playing for themselves or the rest of the guys in that locker room. They're playing for their coach as well. There's a lot of emotional attachment to this team. And so the Baltimore Ravens could be in some trouble. You look at Russell Wilson. He was the second to clinch. And really, after that win in Chicago, that I was convinced they are going to the postseason. I wasn't sold on Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks until they went to Chicago and beat a Chicago Bears team that hadn't bottomed out yet. They weren't playing bad football yet. I thought that was the game that sent the Bears in one direction and the Seattle Seahawks in another. And Russell Wilson, I thought, played his best football of the season in that game. He had better games. He had bigger games in terms of statistical value. But for my money, that was his best performance of the season. They needed big drives out of Russell Wilson in that game, including a 90-something yard drive for them to take the lead that should have stood. It ultimately went to overtime because the defense let him down. He took him down the field again. This time for a touchdown that won them the game in overtime. He was phenomenal in that game, and I thought that propelled him to the status that he's receiving right now in the National Football League. And so they're traveling to Washington to take on the Redskins as they are the 5 seed. They didn't do quite enough to win that division, even though some would argue they're the best team in that division. But they're going against the number 4 seed in the Redskins, who's headed by another rookie in Robert Griffin III, who has his team playing some of the best and hottest football in the National Football League. They're riding a 7-game winning streak going into the postseason. The only team that can lay claim to having a better winning streak is the Denver Broncos, who are at 11. So this Redskins team is playing some confident football right now, and they're at home. And they haven't been the best home team, but of late they've been playing really good football at home, at the friendly confines of FedEx Field. And so it's going to be a tough task for Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks to come in to FedEx Field and get a win. That's going to be the most compelling matchup of Wild Card Weekend in my estimation. You've got 2 rookie quarterbacks squaring off, 2 rookie quarterbacks that play a lot like each other, 2 teams that really mirror each other in terms of what they do. And that's going to be the most fun to watch. It's a shame that one of these members of the starting 5 is going to have to go home. But it also does one thing by these 2 teams playing against each other. It ensures that one member of the NFL starting 5 will be in a divisional round of the playoffs next week. And if all of them had been playing against someone else, we couldn't say that. Someone from this group will be in a divisional round of the playoffs. And that, to me, is excellent. Great news, because I feel like these 3 quarterbacks deserve a shot to do some damage in the postseason. If not win it all, do some serious damage. And someone is going to have the opportunity to do just that. And that's going to wrap it up for the regular season edition of the NFL's Starting 5. I'm your host, Lou. I thank you for joining me. And that's it for Weeden. That's it for Tannehill. You won't hear much more about those guys on this program as their seasons have winded down and come to a head. Meanwhile, you've got 3 quarterbacks in this group still playing, and we'll still talk about them in the weeks to come. And this is going to be a lot of fun watching these guys square off. And so I want you to enjoy this. I know I will. We'll come back next week. We'll chronicle the games that took place and what these members of the NFL Starting 5 were able to do. Were they able to take their team to victory, or are they done for the season? Nonetheless, whatever occurs, They've all had successful rookie campaigns, and you can't take anything away from them. They've been some of the best and brightest rookies we've ever seen in the National Football League. And I tell you what, this is going to be fun to watch. You stay tuned, because I'll be here, and we'll chronicle the NFL's starting 5.
This is your start.